Jiafei. I
Jiafei.
think yeah, thank you so much. I think I just said that I have a mother-in-law, and even after 12 years, she is she's still trying to test different versions of how to pronounce my name. No, but back to you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. First, I would like you to give a short intro so people know why I think it's a good idea to have you here.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks for inviting me to the podcast. So hi everyone who's watching. My name is Jiafei Duan. I'm currently still a PhD student at University of Washington. So I have defended my thesis, but I have not graduated. So I realized that I have one more class that I forgot to take. So I'm taking it right now as of now, and I'm going to graduate in I think 1.5 weeks time from now and my PhD in robotics and AI at the University of Washington, where I'm currently doing my PhD. So it was, yeah, and I work a lot on robotics. So I work on building some of these robotics foundation model, and really trying to push up for the effort of building open science models so that people can reproduce, deploy, and really use it, at a larger scale than what we traditionally see in academic setting. Yeah. And yeah, that's
Um,
a rough overview of like who I am, like a quick TLDR.
there's a few things that I would like to give more context to. I mean, if people who are in robotics, this most likely. We were talking about that you are part of a podcast as well. Maybe you can share a little bit here.
Oh yeah, yeah. So on the side, what I've been doing is that I also work on this broadcast with yeah, not broadcast. So I work with this broadcast with Chris Paxton and Michael Chu. We do this thing called Robot Paper, and the idea is basically we'll reach out to startups, we'll reach out to people who work in the robotic space, but mostly researchers that has pretty well, I guess not really all well-known paper, but really interesting paper that personally we find interesting. And we'll just hit them up and ask them to join our broadcast. And we go really in depth into diving deep into some of their work and really trying to ask the hard question. I'm usually the one to ask the hard question on some of these broadcasts. So really try to have a deeper dive with them and see how this progression, leading to the point where this work is published. And I think most of people who are your viewers who are watching, you might have seen one of these episodes, hopefully it's good. Yeah.
No, we're talking about how far you guys are. I mean, I think it took me like 2 years to get to episode 100, and you guys are already in episode 80 something. And you just told me that, I don't know if it's a secret, but you're always recording something up front. So I think you're doing amazing. Every now and then I have a look or I listen. And but before we come to this is a later part of the journey. People who regularly enjoying this kind of this podcast here, they know that I'm always interested in the person behind the technology, behind the projects. So maybe you can take us a little bit back in time and walk us through.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in upbringing, the environment, people who inspired you, and school. What have you done when you were younger? And yeah, these kind of
Yeah.
things I'm very interested in.
So that's like, yeah, thanks for asking. So I think like usually when I go to talks or like go to podcasts, people never ask these kind of questions. And I think it's also interesting to share. So I grew up, so I spent most of my life in Singapore. So Singapore is like an island somewhere in Southeast Asia. I did my whole educational there. I served the national service in the conscription army. And then in the sense whereby I started all this journey with robotics, I think in my high school, where we actually built one of the first few mobile manipulator. So you could think of it in the way we took PVC pipes from those like Home Depot. We cut the pipes out. We buy those custom smart motor. We connect them. We implemented the most basic PID control, and then we basically mounted the entire frame of a robot arm on top of those toy car that kids used to drive. I mean,
Hmm.
you've probably seen those in the mall. So we remove the whole part of the base, we mount the entire arm on top of it. And then the idea is that was the first robot that I ever built end to end, going from the hardware to the custom PCB chip, the board that I designed in-house, and even to the algorithm that's controlling it. And at that point in time, we actually created a tactile glove So mounted on the robot arm is a dexterous hand. Like, but you can imagine like this is like what 15 years ago, or no,
Hmm.
sorry, 10 years ago. So you can imagine the kind of technology back in the days. And then the idea of this tactile hand, this tactile glove is that we will actually mount force sensors that sort of measures how much force you apply, and then translating that into the gripper, the finger of the other arm. And the finger on that arm is actually more of like a prosthetic arm back in the days, and we mount that on the robot. So that was when I was like, I guess like 16 year old. I did this project with my partner for our course project for the entire year. And that was really the first time I did robotics. And I thought that was really cool. And he won some awards. And I guess like most importantly is the whole journey or the experience of seeing something going from the idea to the actual product. And I think, I mean, if you even if you look at it from today's context, that seems like pretty familiar to some of the current stack that people have been building. But that was like done 10 years ago. So I think robotics has really sort of like sort of I won't say reinvent, but it just gets better and better, and the cost of hardware is getting cheaper and cheaper. People are able to have really like easy access to some of these things. And compared to back in the days, we have to build this from scratch. So that was really like the first entry point into robotics that I have. And then after that, I just go in a totally orthogonal direction from robotics. Yeah.
But before we dive deeper into this one, people know that I always like to understand this is, I mean, to get to this kind of point, there's always, I mean, you said this is like 10, 15 years ago, but
Yeah.
then there's like 10 years before that, because I'm interested in what's the kind of environment you need to grow up to not necessarily be interested in these kind of things, but gaining experience, gaining the knowledge, and but also seeing and being inspired by people, right? Very often in a podcast I can see a pattern of like my brother did this, my sister or my parents did this, or
Oh, yeah.
uncle, and yeah, people very often forget this because they are already like, this is my first robot. But then if you think about this for a few seconds, right, then you understand, oh, actually, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, first thing that I did was starting with Lego or whatever. And maybe you be so kind and think about this for a few
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. So I think like it was really I guess it's more of the curiosity for engineering that sort of drive this rather than like like a story of like someone inspired me into this journey. I think more of like I'm really passionate about engineering. So when I went to high school, I went to like a specialized high school. In Singapore's context, we call it a polytechnic, which means that you learn technical skills. And it's
Mhm.
not the conventional high school that you expect in the US system or in Europe. So that was where I went, and ever since then, I started learning coding at a really pretty young age before university. We dive really into deep down into engineering, circuit design, and the fundamentals of mechanics, and all these different topics that's slightly more advanced than what a high school potentially teaches. But that's really because of the passion for engineering. And if we really have to sort of trace back why I built this arm, I think it was really because like one of my teacher sort of passed me this thing called leap motion. I'm not sure anyone still remember what's a leap motion. So leap motion is like a small device. I think if I'm not wrong, it's from Microsoft. What it does is that it tracks your hand. So it tracks your hand, it tracks the motion of your hand in 3D space. And this was something that already exists pretty long, back in the days. So what I did with that leap motion was that I actually take a piece of like I take a few pieces of like wood. If people is interested, they could still find a video of me doing that demo. So I take
Funny.
a few pieces of like plywood. I glue them together with a server. So it's like those really cheap plastic server. I connect it to an Arduino, and then I connect that to the leap motion. And then what it happens is that whenever my hand moves, the plywood will sort of move in the same motion. So you could think of teleoperation in the most primitive sense back in the days. And that was what it was. And then I find it really fascinating. I was like, wow, you can sort of like control a somewhat robotics robot, robot arm with like really bad kinematics, but it works and it mimics my motion one to one. And I was really impressed. And then when the opportunity came, my teacher sort of said, that, okay, Jiafei, do you want to do a project with me? And then we sort of embarked on that first project I was telling you all about. So it was really about the curiosity of doing engineering, and then that sort of sparks this whole pathway forward. Yeah.
Um, if people think about Singapore, I do know a Singaporean. founder, and he was also on the podcast quite a while ago. I think we first got in contact when I was still working at Siemens. But Singapore is not necessarily the country that you think of when you think of robotics.
Oh yeah,
So, uh, and especially 10, 15 years ago, right? So,
yeah, yeah. So
how
I,
did
I want
this
to
came
sort.
together?
Yeah, yeah. So I think Singapore is a very it's a really nice place. It's a place that people are really open-minded. We have really amazing government that's able to solve, always try to push for the frontier of technology, but then at the same time they are more cautious. So in the sense whereby if you think about it, these are taxpayer money that you're investing into research and technology. So they want to make sure that the technology is good enough, or like to a certain point that it's worth taking that risk. You don't want to sort of spend taxpayers' money, without taking into consideration some of these things. So I think and you're right. So when I started my undergraduate, I work on this topic called embodied AI. But you could think of it, embodied AI in the context of 2018. That was the very early days of embodied AI. Fei Fei proposed this notion of embodied AI after she got really famous from ImageNet. And then there's this whole line of work from Allen Institute of AI that does like ITOR and a whole line of work on embodied AI, embodied navigation. And then what I did was that in my undergrad, I wrote a survey paper just on embodied AI. So it took me like 1 year to try to study and understand what embodied AI is, talk to researchers, and really work, deep dive into this topic and seeing the different kind of frontier research from the US. And at that point in time, there's nothing in Singapore. So the word embodied AI is not a term that people use in Singapore when I was doing my undergrad. Me and my advisor in my undergrad days, we wrote this survey called Embodied AI, and I think today is like one of the highest cited surveys um, uh, going to reach I think it's going to hit about 1,000 soon. But then you can think of it like really at that point in time, this is a new topic, and fortunately, I was given the chance to sort of help to write an article for the National Research Foundation in Singapore. And this article, usually what they do is that they will present it to the ministers or like people who are in political office about this topic or about some rising topic. And you imagine that at that point in time, I wrote an article called Embodied AI. So that is actually something people could find online. And that was the term embodied I was introduced. And in Singapore, there was no such term. And if you rewind time towards today, Singapore actually has one of the largest investment into embodied AI and physical intelligence. So things have changed like so fast. And I think this is a known secret. So in Singapore's research landscape, the government will try to plan 5 years ahead of time. So they will spend a huge amount of research R&D money to sort of plan for future topics. And the next 5 year plan, embodied AI is one of the major focus. So it's kind of rewarding to me also to see like, a small idea undergrad might potentially have and looking at what people have been doing in the States and we sort of propel like, okay, this huge interest and traction of embodied AI in Singapore as a nation. So I think that's something that I think, yeah, it's another way of serving the country.
If you look in the industry just like 2 years ago, right, and when this robotic topic became very hot, I think since 2022, even the term embodied AI just became very hot very recently. I think just this year, last
Yeah.
year. So the first 2 years was just robotics, and now it's embodied AI. Um, I think something that you said is looking what kind of emerging technologies are upcoming, right? And can we fund them very early on? And you said also it's taxpayer money, right? So you would like to be cautious with that money and don't waste it, right? And one of the problems that we do see here in Europe is that this wasting money because you can't see the ROI very immediately is something that is hindering us from like true innovation. Everyone is start funding research. Europe is still pretty strong, but then the two of us were talking about the like deployments in general is something that comes later on throughout the story, right? So here we don't have the guts to stick with those ideas until they are deployable or very early deployable, and then you see other countries adopting and scaling, right? Do you think that this is something that the Singaporean government is clever enough to do. So not only taking the first risk, but like sticking to it. Yeah,
Yeah, uh, yeah. So I think that's a great question. So I think yes, that's why I'm going back to Singapore as an assistant professor in National University of Singapore, and then I guess like
congrats.
and I'm not the only hire in the past 2 years in robotics or Embodied AI. In fact, they have been hiring almost like a dozen of similar faculties. So what this shows is that we are creating a culture of innovation, and we're trying to create a critical mass in physical intelligence, so that when someone think of where should I go and do a PhD, where should I invest R&D money, it should be in a country like Singapore where there is a critical mass. Correct. So I think that's one of the I guess a insight or a sort of a foresight of the government to sort of look into going beyond that. And I think if you think about it, like I'm not sure if you visited Singapore. Singapore is a country that has no natural resource. We are
Mm.
not a country that sits on a huge pile of oil. So the only thing that sort of really given us the strength is the location, and is the kind of talent that we're able to attract. So I think that is one of the critical factor that sort of puts us on the map. And I think that's something that we want to continue to take advantage of, even in this like dynamics world as of now. And I think to sort of answer your question, I feel that it will not be in a way of like I think I don't think Singapore government will want to sort of invest in physical intelligence to sort of look at the deployable stage. Because if you think about it, the market in US and Europe is much bigger than what Singapore could potentially have. So you don't want to do that deployable stage, but you want to be a stage where we are like the hub of R&D, or we are like the hub of like if you think about it, like where Singapore physically located is actually along the streets of Malacca, and that's one of the most busiest trade routes in the world, with 1/3 of the trade going through that. So if you think about in that sense, then maybe we could also be the robotics hub of the world, in the sense whereby I guess maybe think of it in the sense whereby there's a lot of bridge, or there's a lot of things that have not been bridged between what robotics scene looks like in China versus what robotics looks like in Europe and US. And where do you potentially find the intersection? It could potentially be in Singapore. So that could be a way to sort of promote collaboration rather than competition. Yeah.
But I mean, the problem remains that if you do all the investment in the R&D space and then people get hired, you're talking about a bridge. That is an interesting thought, even though I would like to see where the money flows back into that kind of circle, right? I think an analogy is that um, this is a very funny analogy, but let's talk about soccer for a second. So you have a very, or at least you used to in Germany or in Europe, a very good foundation of you training people from a very young age in those kind of schools, and then they go to the different kind of clubs, right, and playing soccer. So there is some sort of rules that a small percentage of the player's salary and the money that goes into that goes back to the school that funded and trained the person for many years, because they most likely will not be able to keep the player because the
Mm.
salaries are too high, but they have such a good school, and somehow this kind of system needs to be financed. So that means even that you're changing and going from the German league to the UK league or to Spain. Some of the money that the player gets still gets funneled back to the original school where this kid comes out from. So because
Mm.
otherwise, think of it, there's a lot of people doing R&D in Europe, and then the R&D goes to or the money comes because the person gets hired in the US or in China, and then the company makes a lot of money, and the person, but there's not too much money go or gets funded, but the money is not going back to Europe, right? So it would be
I
interesting to
see.
understand more, but this is not something that I think that we will be able to finalize here. But yeah, maybe your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, so I think I sort of get your point. I think this is too early to sort of say how the way the system is sort of designed. Obviously, I'm not the policy maker here to sort of look at how why they made this kind of strategic move. But I would imagine that the key here is to make yourself relevant, in this like always changing world, right? In the sense whereby if you look at AI today, the only company that you cannot do without is NVIDIA. If you remove NVIDIA, AI is soft. I don't know how you define AI anymore. So in that sense, we want to. I guess like maybe the strategy move is to be somewhat like NVIDIA, where you're not trying to be the competitor to everyone, but you are trying to make everyone use you in some way. Correct. So I think that's the whole idea. And and once people start to use it, I think that is where, that develops this kind of traction. And this traction sort of stays and, you consistently build partnership. So maybe towards the later part where I talk about some of the research, I think it's the same philosophy that we apply into doing our research, which is that how do you get communities to sort of build traction? Because robotics is a field that is so, I guess, like so decentralized. Everyone is running their own stuff, correct? Someone has robot A, someone has robot B, someone tests on benchmark A, someone tests on benchmark B. So there is this huge decentralization. And this decentralization might not be the most ideal if we really want to make true progress in the field. Yeah. So I think in the more high level of like, the policy making approach is that how do you centralize some of these pipeline or some of these, I don't know, like for example, like if you want to collect data, you might want to do it in Singapore where there's a enough mature ecosystem where teleoperation labor cost is slightly lower than what you can do in US, and things could move much faster. So I'm just saying like this is just what my 2 cents worth of how how could you potentially become relevant in this fast moving world. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing the thoughts. I think this is definitely a conversation worth having. But the podcast is mainly about you as a person. So let's maybe for a few seconds go
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yeah, Singapore as a starting point, as a hub, as you said, was not the end point. Maybe you can walk us through what happened later on.
Yeah. So that's a great thing. So when during my last year of my undergrad, I did quite a number of work on Embodied AI. But at the same time, I'm also really passionate about. So think of Embodied AI at that point in time. It really just means training an agent in simulation. Correct. So there isn't like I'm not doing like core robotics. In fact, I've never touched a robot, even at the point I wrote the survey paper. So at that point, I'm also really interested in cognitive science. So I started applying for PhD. And fun fact, I actually applied for cognitive science program, and I got some of these program offers. And then I was in the intersection to choose between doing robotics, which is something I've never done before, or to go into cognitive science, which is something I'm really interested in. I work on some topics like intuitive physics, those kind of violation expectation, or developmental psychology. So that's a totally different field. And then I made a decision. Okay, I want to do robotics because I think like there is a bit more of me of like I want to see the application of how AI can be deployed. And that's the reason why I joined University of Washington, working with Professor Tita Fox and Ranjay Krishnan. And I think like at that point in time, to be honest, I have never touched a robot before. That means I have no idea how to operate a robot at the academic scale. So sure, I have built like, a robot back in the days, but those are like high school projects. You could imagine that it's not in the same capacity of academic scale where you're using this kind of off-the-shelf robot, deploying the full stack of it. So I think that was something that was totally new, and I think it was really sort of rewarding to see that my advisor, I think Dieter, sort of took the chance on me. And yeah, and for those of the people that's watching, Dieter is a very well-known roboticist in I mean over the world. He's from Germany, but he wrote the textbook of probabilistic robotics, which is like one of the third textbook of robotics. So I think like really it's really kind of like rewarding to see that such a senior faculty took a chance on someone who has zero experience on robotics, and then I really start and that was the point where it all started, right? So I shifted mostly from like cognitive science and embodied into like pure robotics, robot learning, and that's where the whole line of work in my PhD sort of began. And obviously, to sort of stay in the intersection of computer vision and also like what is actually happening around the world. So then it gave rise to a lot of this like robotics foundation model, VLAs, VLMs, and see how we can sort of utilize this to solve some of the challenges in robotics that people have been facing. Yeah. So that's how it leads to that point of my PhD. Yeah.
How was it to you for you to I mean, you I think it's not provocative to say this, but no one gets handed a PhD at this kind of level if there's not bringing someone something to the table, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
so saying you haven't touched a robot might be technically accurate, but obviously your skill set was well enough carved in, so people were offering you this kind of
Yeah.
positions.
Yeah, I think maybe like to answer what I bring to the table when at the point in time given this opportunity, I think it's really the way to sort of look at a problem from the out of the field. Like from the as someone that is not, that's really big into the robotics ecosystem. And then that really helps me to sort of drive some of my early ideas. So like one of the ideas that I work on in my first year of my PhD is this project called AR2D2. And then the idea is very simple. We want to collect data, and the way people collect data is to have real world robot. You do teleoperation, but that is not going to be scalable because no one has a real robot, and no one is able to sort of do teleoperation anywhere, anytime. And what I did was that I built this AR app, augmented reality app that you can download on your phone. What it does is that it projects a augmented reality robot into the physical world, and then it tracks. And as you try to use your hand to grasp an object, you will retarget the robot's position of the gripper to your hand, and then you will record the exact motion of the demonstration. And you could imagine that with that approach, we also introduce a new way of sort of like getting rid of the hand. So we use like inpainting to sort of remove the hand so that the entire video looks really realistic. It captures all the joints of the robot. It captures the exact action of the robot doing the task, interacting with the physical world. And that's the data point that you can collect without actually having a robot. And if you, you probably follow a lot of this line of work, which is that many work after that actually follow this same notion, right? Inpainting the hand, replacing it with a simulation robot arm, collecting human-centric textures, hand manipulation data, and sort of removing that and sort of bridge the gap between the visual fidelity. So I mean, there's a lot of work that came after that as a result of this. But I think what AR2D2 sort of show is a new way of thinking, of looking at the problem from the conventional way of how people have been doing this, which is just to collect data. How do we build better teleop system? But rather to shift the entire paradigm of data collection completely from somewhat, to a device that could potentially fit into your phone. So I think that was why I am able to sort of bring to the table, which is coming from the outsider point of view and really thinking about the problem from a different angle, and that sort of gives to new breakthroughs. Yeah.
So, I mean, basically saying that with the same kind of mindset, you will most likely not be able to come up with different kind of outcomes because you stick to one school of thoughts. I mean, I think this is very much simplified, but due to a lack of words and expertise, this might be, yeah, able to
Yeah, yeah,
sum this up.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true, and also I think people might not realize this, but robotics is one of the most interdisciplinary field of research. Correct. You are sitting in the intersection of perception. If you're talking about language, there's also NLP. You're talking about control. You're talking about, there's so many things like that sort of encompass what robotics is all about. So it's really sitting at the intersection of it. So I think robotics shouldn't be just a problem for roboticists, but it's, for anyone who sort of, wants and is passionate about this, they can sort of do it. Yeah.
Um, Going from Singapore to the US, was there something like from a cultural perspective? Was there something? And this is always something that I'm interested in. Was it hard for you? Was that just exciting? You didn't really had time to think about this because you were so immersed into the work.
Uh, yeah, so I think I really don't have much time to sort of think about this because I feel that like things are moving so fast, and yeah, I did a pretty short PhD, so this is my fourth year. Actually 3.5-ish. So I'm graduating, and as if you count summer, that's like 4 years. So I think I didn't have much time to think about the transition, but it just comes naturally. But I guess maybe the one thing that's sort of different between US and Singapore is that I think back then a lot of the project that I've been working on seems pretty incremental. And I think coming here, in Singapore. So I mean coming here in the States and sort of like being mentored by my advisor, I think I'm able to sort of I guess to relearn I'll sort of unlearn what I learned, correct, and then relearn the things that I want to learn. And it really teaches me a different style of doing research. So I mean, like, academic sense, a regular day of a PhD student, or like someone who does academic research is they try to work on a topic, they submit a conference, and then if their paper get rejected, they polish a bit and they submit to a new conference. So I've been doing a lot of this, in my days in Singapore. And I think the reason is because I feel that a lot of the work that I was doing seems to be a bit incremental, and the way how I structure or how I narrate the story is not really, I have not put that much thoughts into it. And I think that's something that I learned in my PhD. So and that was what my I think that's why I mean that's why people think that you don't need a PhD, but I feel that you still need a PhD because PhD teaches you how to think. How do you think critically? How do you communicate science in a way that is meaningful that people can understand? And I think this is a really powerful capability or ability that you only learn in your PhD. So like when I wrote my first PhD paper, I wrote it with my advisor. And the idea here is that they went through with me the step-by-step thinking process. Not on the technical side of things. So that's covered by me. But really about how do you think about the problem itself. And to be frank, in my first 2 or 3 years, whatever paper I submit has never been rejected. So it's always accept. And that was never the case when I was in Singapore. So I think the whole mindset shift is something that I it sort of opened up to me, after coming here and being this entire ecosystem and talking to people and being mentored by some of these really good mentors. Yeah, yeah.
I think what you're referring to might not, I mean, I think the depends on what kind of path you're looking for. Because
Mm,
at the moment, you do see that much more than in the past. I think this is, I'm able to say this. There's so much more people being transferred, not transferred, but academic people becoming more entrepreneurs as
mm,
universities are pushing for spin outs, as there are more access to accelerators, and especially as more people sharing on social media. So
mm,
I think referring to a PhD is still necessary. Um, the applied side of academia might might be something that can be used very early on. I mean, when I work together with robotic startups, right, and very often the majority of people, or not the majority, but I don't know, 30% of people in a robotic startup have a PhD. So if you go to any other company, I think the average percentage of people having a PhD is not as high, right? So I do think from a technical perspective, I can totally agree. But I think more and more people that have a PhD, and I'm talking to, they tell me, if I would have stayed in academia, then yes, obviously this is the way to go. But I'm more interested in building and applying it, deploying. So I think I don't really need a PhD. I could have gone this route down way earlier.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I feel that I think maybe not to say like you need a PhD and sort of like narrow like put a nail onto it and sort of say this is the definite answer. I think more of specifically for robotics, I feel that right I mean there is still a sort of, I won't say a need, but it's really good to have a PhD in the sense whereby most of the problem in the other space of AI, right, has sort of been being heavily optimized and solved. I won't say solved, but has been sort of achieved a certain level with good engineering. And that if you think about it, is actually building on top of years of academic research. Like these are things that doesn't just happen overnight. Correct. But I think the point about robotics is that we have not reached that point where academic research has really built that foundation for industry to start optimizing. Maybe it might seem like this is the way, but I feel that personally, I don't think that's the way, because if it is, industries, the Googles of the world will start to sort of acquire and starts to sort of converge towards something. I think the converging point in robotics has not yet come. And that's why I think that, the ability to sort of do a PhD helps you to think a bit more about what is the actual solution towards the problem that we need to sort of address, for robotics. And I think, I think maybe in the future, where that converging point has arrived, and then building and deploying and applying is the new trend. And then I feel that at that point in time, doing a PhD might not be that useful. So I think at this point in time, I think robotics is still too mature. sorry, too not mature yet to sort of, for us to say that, we shouldn't be doing this kind of deeper research. Yeah.
I mean, you might be the wrong person to talk to here because I don't know how your ambitions are regarding the commercial side of things, right? So I think a lot of founders that I know that have a PhD in robotics, I think they're very early on, and this is one of the reasons why I have the podcast to better understand where you're coming from, who was influencing you, who had been a role model to you, and so very often people tell me I had a mother or father or uncle or whatsoever who was an entrepreneur, but also an engineer, right? So I really very early saw the exciting part of being an entrepreneur versus people tell me I was always interested in academia, and for me the entrepreneurial side of things it's not something that is challenging for me because for me it's better to really understand the craft and to understand the technical aspects of it, right? The depth of it. So, or you tell me, no, you know what? This is along the road. This is something that I plan that I have on the back of my mind. I mean, maybe you can share with us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what actually I mean, this is my personal thoughts, which is that I think that's what startup is also trying to do today, right? Which in robotic startups specifically, which is that a lot of the things you want to do in the lab setting, you are always constrained by a few things. You're constrained by compute, you're constrained by how fast you can iterate. And I think that's true. Correct. So and as long as there is some sign of life in the research space, people will be able to take this idea and try to deploy it, try to be able to raise and try to get compute and try to iterate fast. And that's really great. That's really great because that is also like a reflection of the kind of research that academia does. And I think I think these two things should happen in the same time, which is that there should be this like uh that there should be this kind of closed loop cycle where academia is proposing new idea and startup is taking this idea and really try to build and sort of engineering and try to deploy in the real world context, and then that feedback comes back into academia, and then we look into some of these new ideas and exploring maybe a 3 years goal from now, and then this continuously become a sort of a closed loop feedback whereby industry and academia, startup and academia can sort of coexist. And
Hmm.
I think the good thing is that with startup you are able to sort of accelerate some of these ideas really fast. And at the same time, you realize some ideas doesn't work, and that will help researchers like myself to realize, okay, this route maybe is not something we should think about, and that's we should probably think about something else. And I think so. This is like really I think it's a good time. I mean, like not often a certain technology that happens right allows for this kind of closed loop cycle. And I think one of the reasons that allows for this is because of compute and hardware costs. Like there's no way you can iterate at this speed if there's no reliable robot, and there's no way you can iterate at this speed without compute and without data. So there is everything has to sort of align so that we can sort of quickly do this kind of iteration cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this one. Um, there's a there's a conference happening starting by tomorrow.
Are
Uh,
you going?
no, actually, I have the pleasure to say that I'm not going, even though I was interested in had the opportunity to support one or two other companies or people. I put together with the help of other people, obviously, an event that is happening on the 4th of June. So um, I put together an event where robotics people, so this is people from ultra robotics, standard bots, fauna robotics, and general intuition, and we were able to secure place. So this is South Park Commons and also a sponsor or two sponsors. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. So I'm flying to New York City in a couple of days. But I mean, there's there's so many things you would like to do, and this was now about me. I was more interested about you and your opinion about what's happening from tomorrow onwards.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be exciting. I know many people are going ICRA. That's happening I think tomorrow. I personally am not going because
Hmm.
I'm actually going to CVPR.
Hmm.
where I'm the main organizer of one of the workshops. And I think this is great, right? Because like what I've been seeing is that there's more people actually going from computer vision conference to ICRA. Like in fact, I see more like really senior computer vision folks actually going to ICRA instead of going to computer vision conference like CVPR, which is one of the the de facto conference for computer vision. And I think this is an implication of an entire paradigm shift, which is that I won't say vision is sort of soft, but I feel that like people start to look into an application of vision, which is like robotics, which I mean like there's people are getting excited about it. And you talk about the event that you saw you guys are organizing, and really seeing that every 1 or 2 weeks or even shorter time frame, there's so much tractions on robotics, either from industry or from startup or from academia, and seeing like there's this whole mixture of people. I see startup going to ICRA. I see people that like I mean, the last time when I went to ICRA, there's even some TikTok streamer, like they go for this kind of academic conference, which is kind of wild to me because like why would you spend $1,000 of registration fee to go into this conference? It just shows that people really sort of putting a huge focus on robotics. And I think this is like it's the best time to be working in this area. And I think I definitely didn't regret choosing this over cognitive science when I started my PhD. But you will never know, right? I mean, at that point in time, nobody knows. So I think this is something that's hard to predict, and it just happens naturally. And I think this is great. I think at the same time, I feel that also like if there's too much things happening at the same time, it's also hard to decide, which one should you sort of go towards. And I think this really also is up to like personal preference. And I think personally for myself, I'm pretty active on Twitter or like on X, and really sort of being sort of like the person that stays close towards startup industry and academia. I think that's where I think I want to be position myself in. So I'll go for academic conference. Sometimes I'll go for some of these like Boston Humanoid Summit, or like some of these like other events where you are talking to people that is not necessarily doing academic research. Correct. And one thing that I've been spending a lot of time doing recently is when we released MolmoAct 2, we actually released a checkpoint that could work out of the box for SO100, which is that lay robot, low cost $200 robot arm. And there's a ton of hobbyists, like people who just passionate about robotics, who, they build this like SO100 in their home and they just want to play with it. I work with them, helping them to sort of debug and making sure that they can run their first policy, which is a MolmoAct 2 on their robot. So I think these are things that I enjoy doing beyond. I mean, obviously they're not doing academic research. They're just maybe like, they enjoy doing this on weekends, they enjoy, playing, collecting some demo, training some simple tasks. I think that's what robotics should be all about, right? Which is to sort of, making it accessible for everyone. And I think having these events that, we are seeing right now and not restricting who can attend, who cannot attend, is really making this whole, robotics sort of accessible. Yeah.
I mean, something that might be an analogy of that, but I mean, Hugging Face with the democratization of robotics, and as you said, giving more people access to these kind of things. Uh, I just have a friend of mine. Hope he listens. People were using this, not necessarily, not everyone intentionally, but some people and institutions definitely, to hold these kind of barriers, right? Like sometimes imaginary barriers, sometimes real barriers, to keep people out of the game. And now with AI, I mean, there's different sides to it, but I have a friend who just started doing music with AI, right? Not a singer, not a musician himself, but being able to express his feelings and thoughts in a way that he was unable to do before, right? And filmmaking is I mean, on one side, AI is eating an entire industry. On the other side, it will be liberating a lot of people, right? They have great thoughts and they would like to do some stuff. And now you're able to do everything on your computer. And coming back to robotics, you do need to stay in academia for a very long period of time. As you said,
Mm.
right, you were doing a PhD that was a bit shorter than usual, but a bachelor is at least 3 years. A master's is 2 years in Germany, so that makes 5 years. The majority of people that I know that do a PhD is everything between 4 to 7 years. Yeah,
Mm.
5 years, let's say 5 years. So that's 10 years in academia just to get a PhD, and then a postdoc. And now you have this awesome opportunities to ask the LLM for all the gaps of your knowledge, and then watch a few YouTube videos. As you said, you buy a robot. You can even buy an assembled one, or you can download all the files and print it yourself and then assemble. And now you can start training policies. And I think this is so great. And I think we're also early, right? Because as you said earlier, one of the reasons why you got the PhD was because you were able to think out of the box. It's
Right.
such a cliche frame or buzzword, thinking out of the box, but this is what it is, right? You have been
Yeah.
trained to think in a certain way for a very long period of time, and now someone comes up, doesn't have this baggage. I mean, it's a skill also, but doesn't have the baggage and thinks in a total strange, orthodox unorthodox way of applying or testing or experimenting things, right? And I think this is great.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I think one thing that maybe some roboticists they don't really appreciate that much, which is that they don't really appreciate, this like community building or like, having people to sort of buy cheap robots and sort of deploy. And I think honestly, I think this is actually very good for academic research in robotics because it really let people know how difficult robotics is. Correct. In the sense, if you think about it, like you have to buy the robot, you have to print the robot, you have to, collect 100 demonstrations, and then you train a policy and you realize that the policy does not work when certain things in the environment changes. And that makes people more appreciative of the kind of research that roboticists are sort of working on. And at the same time, to see that, okay, where are we right now? I guess like having some form of reality check. I think it's always easy to look at a demo and look at, oh wow, robotics is like is soft. We have so many cool demos until they buy a robot and try to deploy it themselves and realize that we're still far from that. I think that is like really like personally to me, I feel that I want to make robotics more accessible and more open to everyone. And I guess that has also been the philosophy of a lot of my work that I've been working on here at the Allen Institute of AI and also in UW, where we develop this kind of open science robotics foundation model. And I've been, with the most recent release of MolmoAct 2, I've been getting emails from people who bought a brand new robot, have never done anything with robotics, just ran a few lines of code, and then our model works on their robot, really well, and they're impressed. I think in some sense, what we are trying to do is we are trying to plant a seed in some of these people, whereby they realize, okay, there is this, passions of doing robotics, and hopefully they can explore more. And I'm not saying that, our model is solving everything, but at the same time, you want people to see a glance of the future where you don't need to do some of this, hard labor of teleop, and robotics could essentially become easy to be deployed. So I think that's the whole vision that I have. And obviously for people to understand why it even work in the first place, I don't think a closed source model can help anyone understand what actually goes down. And if you can't inform the public of what actually, goes down, then this will just be a game of a few privileged people. So I think that was the philosophy that we have. Yeah.
You were mentioning the institute now, and as we're finding the way, as we're coming towards the end of the podcast, maybe you can maybe you can tell me a bit about the work that you've been done there, and I think very recently you shared very publicly that you left, that this was your last day, and that you are aiming for doing something different that you also mentioned already. But maybe you can spend a few more minutes on those two topics.
Yeah, for sure. So, for a huge portion of my PhD, I think about 2 years of my life, during my PhD, I spent my time in because it's a joint appoint, it's like, I guess like a lot of our PhD students here, they do student researcher. So, I spent a lot of my time in this place called AI2, which is the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And, I guess like in many sense, this is the true open AI, whereby everything is opened. So what I mean by that, it means that whatever model we train, we open source the data, we open source the code, we open source the checkpoint, we open source the technical report of how you can potentially replicate everything. And the idea is that because this is a non-profit organization, so everything we are doing is for AI for the better for the good of humanity. So I think and building and what AI2 has been offering is that AI2 has been building its own large language model, it's building its own vision language model. And then when I joined, I was fortunate to be able to lead the effort to build its own vision language action model, which is what we see commercially today, like for example, physical intelligence, Pi 0.5, or even Gemini robotics kind of models. So I was able to lead the effort to build this series of model called MolmoAct, which is building on top of the in-house VLM model. And the idea of MolmoAct is that it's fully open end to end. It allows people to diagnose actually what actually goes down the hood, and we release every single data point that was ever collected, used for training. And this is something that usually startup doesn't. You see a lot of robotics startup, but you don't see a lot of robotics data. But trust me, they have a ton of data, but no one is giving you for free. So, and I mean, I don't expect them to give for free. I mean, this is the reality, right, of things. But I think, as a non-profit organization, I think it's really our due diligence to be able to do good science and also to figure out why things works and try to better educate, the public or even academia on how to build some of these large-scale model. And with that, we released our most recent MolmoAct 2, which is the second edition of this class of models. And it has been well received by the community, whereby now you're able to, at least for 3 different robot embodiment, people could download the checkpoint and deploy it on their own environment, without, doing any kind of calibration or, with their own robots. So I think that's one of the first signs of this kind of zero-shot deployment out of the box by an open source company. So by an open source company at scale. So I think that's what I've been working on, and that sort of comes to the end, and same as my PhD. So I'm going to start a new job in Singapore as an assistant professor at the National University of Singapore, which what I'll be is hopefully working on is really to sort of cultivate the next generation of roboticists and really try to tackle some of the questions that we have not yet found an answer. Which is that one of the things that really matters a lot to me is like, what is the right architecture for robotics? So you've seen people using VLAs, you've seen people using world action models, right? And these are all models that's very data non-efficient. That means you need to have a huge amount of data, and scaling this at scale is not going to be pragmatic because you will have like factories. I mean, there's already factories of people collecting data at massive scale. But I honestly feel that there's more underneath the surface than what we see. And I think my group's focus, which just a bit of shout out here, is that my group is called the Magic Lab, Manipulation and General Intelligence Control. What we're going to be focused on is to really have a deeper study of what is the right model architecture, what is the right approach of scaling robotics foundation model moving forward. And why is it called Magic? Why is it called Magic Lab? Because I personally am a magician. I do magic tricks, and you can think of it. A magician's hand is like the best embodiment of dexterity. So for those people who know me personally, they have seen me doing magic. And so that's like one of the reasons why it's called Magic Lab. And then I think it's really exciting. So I'm really excited to work with my future students and to really dive deeper into some of these challenging problems and really see that how can we make training some of these models more efficient.
Thank you so much for the journey. Thank you so much for the stories and the behind the scenes events for such a trivial thing as a name, magic. There's always something behind. I'm looking forward to more of your content, right? I've been sharing a lot of your content in the past. I think you're giving, and you're not only sharing your own content. I mean, one of the things that I do as a curator is trying to find interesting people that share good content as well, right? So you're opening up an entire new world. If people are interested they should obviously follow your channel, and I will do. I do, but also interested to see more coming out of your own lab now that you're ahead of, or being one of the leaders here, to see, because I think a shift is happening at the moment, and more labs are opening up, because back then everything, as you said, was very closed, and you needed to be within those elite circles to have access to these kind of things, and more labs understanding. Meno Lab, for example, I think they are
in Singapore,
they are one of the major pushers of open source humanoids in the recent past, and I think it's a great example of that, right? And making people, giving people the opportunity to not only seeing, but being able to contribute, being able to participate, right? So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think I always believe in greater, the strength comes in the grace of many, right? So rather than just a few. So I think that is like one of the things that I feel that we could really sort of push for. And as a community, we sort of grow. And I think like, I mean, we always okay. Maybe sort of to end off this thing. I think like always people asking what's the ChatGPT moment of robotics. I
Mm.
think ChatGPT moment of ChatGPT happened because of many things, correct? And it's building on top of so many other work tools, open source data, open model architecture, and that's why we have this ChatGPT moment. So I think robotics ChatGPT moment will come when there's more open source efforts of tools, data set, and all these kind of other components. Yeah.
I think that was a good way to end this. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to see more. When will be the exactly time? Because you said that you're going to graduate like in 1.5 weeks. When will be
Yeah.
the point in time where you actually fly over and stay and work and publish?
Yeah. So I will start my official job in end of July. So that's why I'll start my job as a professor. Yeah.
Congrats. I think it was
Thank you.
a long time and a lot of ups and downs. And I think this will be a new chapter in the journey, right? So I hope maybe in the future we're going to see each other again from different positions. And until then, thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the broadcast.
Take care.
Yeah.